In this lesson, we'll begin adding some damage and decay to the buildings on our scene skyline. Okay, so at this point, we've got these buildings. We've tried to push them back in the last lesson using several different adjustment layers. Now, one other thing we pointed out is that these buildings really don't have the kind of dirt and decay and overgrown foliage that our building here in the foreground and midground has. So let's come over here and see if we can work to maybe resolve that issue a little bit. So I'm going to come over here into my buildings group, and let's go ahead and pick on the buildings on the left first here. So, we created a smart object out of those buildings. So let's just come over and add a layer mask to that smart object. And we'll come in here and grab a brush. I'm going to go ahead and grab this ink brush. It's just a simple hard round brush. And we're just simply going to come in and use this mask to chisel away at some of the building. Now, keeping in mind that this is a hard round, so it's going to leave us with this hard edge, we might want to come in here and soften that edge up, maybe 50%. So if we were to come in and do that, we could start to take some chunks out of the building here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to step back a few times, and let's soften our brush tip up quite a bit. We might even go with just one of these soft round brushes here. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that down almost all the way, so we can get a little bit more of a kind of a feathered, damaged edge to it. Just kind of alternating the size of my brush to indicate damage here. Now, obviously, that damage is pretty detailed as far as the edge. It's pretty crisp compared to the rest of this. So we could come over here and maybe grab our blur tool to fix that. It's underneath the smudge tool here, actually right there at the top. So I'll go ahead and grab that. I'll leave my strength at 50%. And we'll just come in and start to blur that a little bit. Increase the size of my brush. There we go. Now we have kind of a chiseled off edge of that building here. So we've gone ahead and masked out the smart object to start taking chunks out of the buildings here. So maybe we could come in and knock out a little bit more. We could do that really on both sides, but just by simply masking off the smart object. But we still haven't resolved the issue of the dirt and decay and even foliage. Now, foliage from this distance is not going to be really discernible as vegetation. So let's just come over here in the top of our group, and we'll add a new layer. And I'll just call this, I'll just put DMG for damage. And let's go ahead and grab a brush. Let's go ahead and grab one of our structure brushes that we've used several times. So we could come in, and this one's a pretty good brush because it doesn't have a lot of sharp edges in it like this one right here does. This one has a lot of little crisp edges. I want to come in and grab this one here, which is structure 3, and let's use this damage layer, which one too many M's there. There we go. Let's come in and just sample some of these darker colors. Maybe a color like this over here. Now that's actually pretty dark, so we probably want to make sure and begin to erase some of this back. So we can grab our eraser tool, and you can see I already have that same structure brush set to the eraser tool. And I might come in here and just start to feather that back. I'll go ahead and hit 3 on my keyboard to set my opacity to 30%, and we'll just kind of start blotting at this. Now we could also come over here and change the blend mode for our layer, just simply by coming over here like so in the layers panel and maybe set that over to multiply. Now that gets really, really dark really, really quick. So we're going to want to use our eraser tool to sort of try and feather that back. And remember that there's another building here in front of the building we're painting right now. So we want to make sure and not have this dirt overlapping onto the building that's in front. It will sort of ruin the illusion of depth here. So just come in and blot in some dirt. Let's see if we can maybe sample some of the greens from our ivy up here, since we're feathering back using our eraser tool. So that's already starting to look pretty good as far as the dirt and decay that we've added to that building there. So now let's switch over here to the buildings on the right, and we're going to kind of do the same thing. So again, we could come in here and grab our smart object and add a layer mask to that. grab our brush tool, and let's go ahead and grab again that ink brush, and we'll just drop the hardness almost all the way down. And I'm going to go ahead and take a chunk out of maybe this building right here. So maybe we come in and maybe the edge of this building has been blown off or fallen off, just crumbled away. Sort of like so. And again, we'll just grab our blur tool and come in and kind of fuzz that out, just so it matches with the blur that we have assigned to this smart object. So there we go. That's starting to look like it fits a bit more. Now we can come in and do that to any of these buildings. Maybe we come in here and even handle this building right here. Same type of process. Grab our blur tool. Just come in and blur that out some. Just dabbing away at that. Now, we need to add some dirt and decay to these buildings as well. So, again, I'm just going to select my group here for the right-hand side buildings. And let's go ahead and add just a new layer inside. Again, call that damage. Go ahead and grab our brush tool again. And again, we're going to use the same structure brush. So, I'll come in here. I believe that was structure 3. And let's go ahead and set this over to multiply. Now, these buildings are much lighter, much more washed out. They're a little further back, and they're taller, so they're disappearing into the atmosphere. So we may want to drop the opacity of our brush down a little bit. It's actually going to be pretty dark here. So I want to hit the 3 on my keyboard again and go with 30%. And let's go ahead and drop the saturation down quite a bit too. Because as you recede into the distance, colors become more and more desaturated. So I'm going to step back a few times just so we can get rid of that saturation here. We're going to start to just feather this dirt in on top of this building here. Maybe hit the X on our keyboard. Come back over here and sample maybe this color. Let's handle that saturation issue a little. Come in and add a little bit of a second color here. Holding down Alt and right-clicking and dragging to increase and decrease the size of my brush. I know I've said that several times, but I wanted to make sure that that comes across to you. That's one of the most useful keyboard shortcuts that I have found here inside of Photoshop. So now we have a little bit of an issue I just spotted here. This building, we actually have a little lip of it here that looks like it's sticking out. So I'm just going to simply grab my smart object and use my move tool, and I'll just tap the down arrow on my keyboard a few times just to nudge that down, and so we don't have that. Now we could always come in here with a bit darker hues and kind of maybe punch some bigger holes in here, but we have to really manage how dark we're getting with this. So let's come in here. Maybe I'm going to feather this texture back just a bit. Maybe we wanted to maybe punch out some of these, like a hole here in the side of this building. So we'll just come in and start to kind of paint that in here. Now, when I say manage the values, we don't want the values of this hole to get too dark, or rather darker than the other values that are present in that particular building at that distance, because that's when it becomes to start looking unbelievable, or like it's fake. So you can see I've gone pretty dark with that, and that hole just seems to stand out. That's the first thing you notice about that building. So let's go ahead and use our eraser tool to feather that back a little bit. There we go. All right, so I may work a little bit more on these buildings in between lessons, but at this point, let's go ahead and move on to the next and final lesson for our course. And we're just going to, in that lesson, begin handling some general atmosphere and bringing in some light from our light source.